We are about to follow the most elusive, the most controversial figure in recorded history. Known about in every country of the world and hotly debated in every language under the sun, no one has been so passionately argued about or so fiercely defended.
There are some things he can do which we cannot do.
الإنسان لا يستطيع أن يدركه.
He said there are diverse ways of relating to him.
ये मेरा friend भी है.
He might not exist at all.
उसमें कभी भी दुख का स्पर्श जो है नहीं होता है. जो खोजे सो पावे.
He must be dead.
The very existence of this figure has never been proven. Even though people seek a higher power in some way, every hour of every day somewhere on our planet. Despite our accomplishments, whether social, financial, or scientific, we continue to search for meaning in our lives, as individuals and as a species. We seek explanations for the injustice, inequality, and hatred we see around us. We watch as people kill each other. We watch as our environment is polluted and degraded. And while we may actively concern ourselves with these issues, many of us still feel powerless in the face of them. One of the ways we deal with the pain and fear that we feel is to reach out for something greater and more powerful than ourselves. We pray, we invoke, we cry out for someone or something to give us peace and happiness, and to somehow create order out of chaos. This film is about to uncover the many mysteries that surround God. Who is this higher power? And why does this being play such a crucial role in our world? Nothing has baffled us human beings more than the meaning of life.
Why did I come into this world? Why do I exist? In what does happiness consist? What is it that when I have, my desires will be fulfilled? How do I arrive at complete internal peace? What will happen to me when I am dead? Is there a life after death? If so, how? Where? How can I make sure to get a seat booked, first class if possible? These are fundamental questions. They go beyond the next 10 minutes, the next 2 years. That's why people look for God.
We know more about the universe today than ever before. Different creation theories have emerged that reduce once commonly accepted stories about our origins to mythology, perhaps even making God redundant. But no such scientific theory has offered us anything that has stopped the questioning, the searching, the praying. Nothing yet has replaced God in the human psyche.
Because human beings think in all sorts of ways. We understand the universe in all sorts of ways, and science is one of those ways. I happen to think it's a very powerful way in its own domain. But there's no way that science is all of truth.
Today, there are hundreds of religions and belief systems, and each one claims to know the truth about God. But in spite of all the claims, for many people, the hunger for meaning has still not been satisfied, and the search for God continues.
I think that the search for meaning reflects the need. Therefore, for me, it is perhaps the most eloquent testimony of the fact that those people's souls are alive. The sad people are not the people that's searching. The sad people are people that don't feel any need to search. And that suggests perhaps that their souls are in a very, very serious state of affairs, and maybe terminal.
All you do is read the Gita is the way. Lord Krishna, all you do is read the Gita. All you do is
आत्मा अपने आप को भूल गई है, इसलिए परमात्मा से कनेक्शन टूट गया है। लेकिन ओरिजिनल जो है वो आत्मा का कनेक्शन अविनाशी हर जन्म में परमात्मा के साथ है। तो फिर से आत्माओं का जो निजी संबंध का आधार है वो खींचता है, और सभी समझते हैं कि परमात्मा से मिलना चाहिए, परमात्मा से कुछ अनुभूति होनी चाहिए, इसलिए ढूंढते हैं।
I understand the great hunger, the great need to believe. Whether it's genetic, whether it just comes from the dread of death, whether it's a function of some sort of innate curiosity, some unsatisfied curiosity in human beings, I don't know. It's probably a bit of all those things. But I have to say that the more I looked at the effect of God in the world, the less I liked the notion. In the last century, 160 million people died in wars and genocides. That's a lot of people. Most of them died in conflicts exacerbated by religious belief. If God had ever existed, he must be dead.
You see, I think that kind of question of whether God exists is sort of a pre-modern question. Well, that's not fair to say, call it that. It is no more relevant a question than the question, what makes you think that you exist? For me, God isn't a speculation.
अनुभव ਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਤੇ परमात्मा है जरूर। ਆਪਾਂ ਕਦੋਂ ਅਨੁਭਵ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਵੀ ਪਰਮੇਸ਼ਰ ਹੈਗਾ।
According to worldwide religious census, there are approximately 4.5 billion people living today who believe in a higher power.
كما نعلم أن الله سبحانه وتعالى هو غيب. معنى ذلك أن الإنسان لا يستطيع أن يدركه. ولكن هل كل شيء لا يدركه الإنسان هو غير موجود؟ والجواب المسلم به لا، لأن الإنسان إذا كانت حواسه محدودة، وللسائل أن يسأل: إذا عرفنا ذلك كيف يمكن أن تعرف الله وهو غيب؟ كيف يمكن أن تعرف الله وهو غيب؟
But it seems to me that people these days will accept any sort of God rather than live in a world without one.
Scientists are pretty evenly split between those that do accept a God and those that don't accept some sort of God. So science just cannot say, yes, there is a God, but it equally well cannot say, no, there is not a God. It really, genuinely has nothing to say on the subject.
이나요 아니 고드 켈레나 아니 고드 켈레나 고드 기실하나 모두 쇼스노 또 레데게 또 야버리 티 페도 야분도 산데게스 무슨 고드 켈레 아니 티티니지 보노지 제게들 베메스바 페도 야버 거예 난다 메난다 페도도 예 마야 나라다 지 크로스 예 나다 메나 가고 말이 티 야비샤도
Throughout history and still now, atheists and believers alike have questioned God's apparent indifference. Their voices may be varied, but their questions are the same. Where is God now? How can he or she let this happen? These are some of humanity's most persistent and heartfelt questions.
Take the swastika and all it signifies for the 20th century. A God that would allow Holocaust to occur, my God.
The question, especially that people ask with regards to the Holocaust, where was God, is the wrong question. The question is, where was man? Because God gives us the free will, and the free will means that we can do wonderful things and we can do terrible things. And therefore, in that sense, God stands outside the realm of human decision-making.
Suffering in the world doesn't prove that God is not there, but it can prove that human beings are not using their freedom well.
가게가 아니 강가 첨부 15지 용료하래서 강가 첨부 15지 용들이 다 소식을 세 드나 소식 세려하래 소식 세 마다는 이제 땅 안에 도시 뭐지기 땅에 뭐유이들 다 뭐가 단다 될랜데 되죠 아니 니바지지 요리 상거야 리스 마체 된 니바지 가시가 아니 다 거르스는다 개조스는다 다 뭐죠 이들이 요리 다 들이지 요리 스텔자디가 봐 뒤치사한테 봐 뭐 샤왈랜데 되는지 미국 두면도 다티 텔레 니바치지 예로선나 다티니 라완다지를 두스타디 요리스 어텐디샤 오케이 데리스 다테 가르세그다 연주시잖아 다 두선다고 지리스 딘디 있다마 같이가 아니 두스제스는 땅에 데리 데리지 제게 됐다 Merkanga Anichi and Ravanda Uji, there is Tachi, Kangadichi, Ravanda Uji, Jabe Ravanda Uji, Yapu Yonda Uji, Aniki, Yungris, and Davanda Uji, Yorite, Tate Kalakaris, Ravat, and Davat you have Kalakaris. God in the Kachu and the chase or Ravanda Yorite. Susi Keke Chambergawati, Chay, the Tekalakam, no matter what I can Kalakam.
मनुष्य को जब तक दुख नहीं आता है तब तक जो है भगवान को याद नहीं करता है। जब हम अपनी सुरक्षा अपने से, अपने लोगों से या अपने और परिवार के लोगों से जब हम भी सुरक्षा नहीं हो रही है, ऐसे जब हमको मालूम होगा, पूरा विश्वास हो जाएगा, तभी हम जो है भगवान की तरफ हम लोग जाते हैं।
هناك علاقة خفية بين كل إنسان وربه. حتى لو كان هذا الإنسان ملحدا. ولذلك متى يعرف الإنسان ربه؟ عند المصيبة، عندما يكون في البحر وتبدأ السفينة بالتحطم فيقول المؤمن والكافر يا رب أنقذنا. المؤمن وغير المؤمن، لأن غير المؤمن عندها يعرف أن لا قوة في الدنيا تستطيع أن تنقذه إلا الله عز وجل.
We need God even more now. And we need to be courageous in how we move into the chaos, believing that God is with us.
The state of the world today sometimes use an aphorism of the great Spanish cellist Pablo Casals, who on his 80-something birthday was being interviewed by the press in Madrid, and he was agreeing with them that the world was in a terrible mess. And then he cocked his head and he said, "The situation is hopeless. We must take the next step."
Well, we're definitely going to see catastrophic changes. Probably within the next 5 to 10 years, going to see the peak of the production of oil. And industrial societies are going to face the greatest crisis in their history. In fact, this is likely to be the greatest crisis in the history of humankind because of the number of people involved and also the ecological implications. The consequences for human beings of these catastrophic events are going to be overwhelming. There's no question about it. Human societies, industrial societies, are likely to disintegrate in various ways, and that's fairly easy to predict just on the basis of the history of industrialism.
भगवान का यही रोल है जो पुरानी दुनिया या जो डर्टी गंदी चीज़ है दुनिया में या मनुष्य आत्माओं में जो विकार अशुद्धि आ गई है उसको शुद्ध करना भगवान की विशेष कार्य है। पुरानी दुनिया का विनाश और नई दुनिया की स्थापना के निमित्त बनना और वो पुरानी को ख़त्म करना और नए को स्थापन करना, उसके लिए संगम टाइम ही हो सकता है, क्योंकि वहाँ विनाश भी चाहिए, स्थापना दोनों का साथ चाहिए, इसलिए वो संगम युग पर ही आता है। उसी टाइम ही आकर के, जैसे रात ख़त्म होती है तो दिन शुरू होता है, अंधकार ख़त्म होके रोशनी आ जाती है, ऐसे पुरानी दुनिया ख़त्म होके नई दुनिया सुखमय स्वर्ण युग, जिसको स्वर्ग कहा जाता है, अभी परमात्मा के प्रत्यक्ष का समय आ गया है। इसीलिए क्योंकि परमात्मा तब भी आता है जब उसका कार्य होना है।
The end of time and the return of paradise almost always includes this element of the return of the divine being, God, goddess, gods, whatever, depends on the culture, the religious tradition, and so on. For example, the Aztecs spoke of Quetzalcoatl, and they believed that Quetzalcoatl would return at the end of time. The Gabonese Pygmies, or Mbuti, also speak of their creator Kumvum returning at the end of the world. Virtually all cultures that have a linear view of history speak of an end of history, and at that end of time, the divinity, God, goddess, gods will return to set things right. Now, when God returns, he, she, they will restore things to the beginning, which means setting to rights all of the damage that's been done to the earth and the environment. Is that the return of the golden age, the return of paradise? Well, it would seem that that's what people for thousands of years have been projecting in their consciousness.
Most of us, atheists, skeptics alike, would happily say, well, we were wrong, if this afternoon a great face appeared over Sydney, immensely large, and spoke to us in great echo chamber voice and said, behave yourselves, you are not getting this right. Then I would be on my knees in a flash.
The existence of a higher power is either a universal truth or a mass delusion. In the absence of any verifiable proof, what we're left with are personal experiences.
And the first time that I see things from God, when I go to Mecca. When I was in the Medina, the city of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I saw the Prophet like I saw you beside his grave. More than a minute, I saw him. And I saw him very beautifully. And when we arrived to Mecca and I see the Kaaba in my eyes, I weep very much because my guilties or my bad thing that I make in my life, I cry and I weep so much until my beard was wet. And I saw the Kaaba. This is a room, you know it. I saw it like a soul, and he was يرقص, dance, like a soul that dancing. And this thing, I know that God gave me a gift. I know at that time that God loved me, and He received my love for Him.
हमको तो पहला अनुभव है कि हम कोई, मैं समझती हूँ 14-15 वर्ष की होंगी, तो कृष्ण का साक्षात्कार तो करते ही थे, लेकिन एक दिन मैंने ज्योति बिंदु जो परमात्मा निराकार है उसका साक्षात्कार किया। लेकिन जब पहले मैंने ज्योति बिंदु को देखा तो ऐसे मुझे लगा जैसे ये मेरा सब कुछ है, ये मेरा फ्रेंड भी है। जो फीलिंग जो है वो मुझे जैसे एक निश्चय हो गया कि परमात्मा बीज रूप सब संबंध में है और सर्व प्राप्ति है। जब वो सीन समाप्त हो गई तो कुछ टाइम तो जैसे मेरे आँखों से, मन से वो जावे ही नहीं जैसे वो दृश्य, और ऐसे लगे कि बस मैं इनको ही देखती रहूं, इनसे ही बैठी रहूं। लवलीन जैसे स्टेज होती है, ऐसे मुझे उसमें अनुभव।
चौरासी ਦੇ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 2 ਰਾਤਾਂ ਤੇ 1 ਦਿਨ ਮੈਂ ਹਰਮੰਦਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਗੋਲੀ ਵੱਜਣੀ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਧਰੇ ਰਹਿ ਗਈ, ਕਿਤੇ ਕੈਂਕਰ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗੀ ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਲੋਕ ਬਾਹਰ ਮਰੇ ਪਏ ਸਨ ਤੇ ਮਰਦੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਸਨ, ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਰਿਆ ਫਿਰਦਾ ਵੀ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਹਰਮੰਦਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ 2 ਰਾਤਾਂ ਤੇ 1 ਦਿਨ, ਕਿਤੇ ਕੈਂਕਰ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗੀ। ਪਰਮੇਸ਼ਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਬਲ ਹੈ, ਤਸੀਰ ਹੈ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਣਾ ਕਰਕੇ।
Io ho vissuto un'esperienza particolare durante il terremoto ad Assisi. Ero in basilica al momento del crollo delle volte e lì credo, facendo esperienza della morte, perché è mancato poco, il Signore mi stava quasi per chiamare, ho avuto una specie di sintesi che io chiamo un feedback molto bello, e in questo momento l'unica cosa che io ho chiesto al Signore, ho detto: Signore, io desidero abbracciarti, anche se qualche volta ho colto degli errori nella mia esperienza, ma il mio più grande desiderio è quello di incontrarti, di poterti abbracciare. Ecco, questo è quello che desidero ottenere.
I was extremely open to God, I believe, and I was having a regular sort of prayer, a conversation with God, if you like. Somehow in my mind I understood God talking to me saying, Rowena, I want you to be a pastor. And I was just so taken aback by this, and I was a bit cross with God because I said, hey, you know that I can't be a pastor. In the church I'm in, they just don't have women pastors, so you know, God, you're just going to frustrate me and lead me down this blind alley, and I'm not very appreciative of that. And it was like God was saying, well, Rowena, don't you worry, you just take any opportunity that I show you and I'll look after the rest.
मुझे ये पहले लाइट का साक्षात्कार हुआ। और उस लाइट से एक एंजल प्रकट हुआ, जो एंजल भी बहुत ही प्रकाशमय था। फिर हमने देखा कि ये जो एंजल रूप में है उसके भीतर बहुत पावरफुल लाइट आई और फिर उसने हमें बहुत ही लाइट माइट की दृष्टि दी। फिर उसके जब भी हम ट्रांस में थी तो मुझे अनुभव हुआ कि मैंने गॉड को माना, परमात्मा का अनुभव किया।
كان شعوري غريبا عندما نظرت لأول وهلة إلى الكعبة. أحسست بسعادة غريبة لم تسبقني سابقا، لم تأتي إلي سابقا. لأول وهلة أشعر بالعظمة، أشعر بالرحمة، أشعر بأشياء كثيرة تلف جسدي.
For some, God is included in every moment of their day.
I adore him. I thank him. I praise him. I ask him favors. And I ask him to help me to do his will. I ask him to help me to keep moving towards him and never to turn away from him. Because without him, my life has no meaning.
But others have simply given up on the idea of God.
When I was very young, 5 years old, and I remember it vividly, sleeping in my little sleep out at my grandparents' house, I tried to make contact with up above. Sent out little feeble messages night after night into the void, but never got an answer. No, my calls were never returned. And for a time I felt absolutely desolated, overwhelmed by a dread of living in an empty, meaningless universe. But it's amazing how quickly you accommodate yourself to that. Now, at the age of 61, I've long been at peace with the fact that I live in a cosmology that has no author and no purpose.
Then there are those who experience something so unique that it's difficult to express in words. This higher power is depicted in as many different ways as imagination will allow, from a bearded old man to an all-seeing eye in the sky to a simple living point of light. As yet, there is no one universally accepted image of God.
I've done a couple of books and I think about a dozen television shows with Paul Davies, who's one of the very few prominent scientists and scientific writers who believes in God passionately. Paul tells me that he began as an agnostic, and the more he studies science, the more he sees the face of God in the equations. You know, it's a God that doesn't interfere in human affairs, that doesn't give us stuff about billions of humans being evaporated by, say, a colliding comet or an asteroid. Now, if people think that's an acceptable God, okay, that's fine. I could probably find more plausibility in that notion than I do in any of the older models of God as Father Christmas, smiling benignly down on us from a comfortable cumulus cloud.
People concentrate on God as a judgmental figure. Who is just looking out for the next thing you do wrong and almost with glee ticking up or putting a cross next to your name that you know you're going to have to work very hard to undo. And the thing is that many people I come across have been totally put off God and have been frightened by God and therefore may even reject God. So yes, I think I'm a very abstract person at this point and don't have like an old man with a grey beard or something sitting up there on a heavenly throne, but rather maybe the scriptures capture it when they talk about the gentle breeze or the dove image, where there's that movement of life force.
भगवान को सत चित आनंद कहते हैं। तो सत का अर्थ होता है सदा सदा रहने वाला, चित्त का अर्थ होता है सदा प्रकाश रूप, तो आनंद का अर्थ होता है सदा सदा आनंद। जो सत्य जो है वो कभी नहीं होता है।
There's a one wonderful term within Jewish tradition to describe God. The Hebrew word hamakom, which means the place, which means basically the source of all. And that's, I would say, the way I think most intensely about God.
نعرف أنه يعلم السر وأخفى، نعرف أنه أحاط بكل شيء علما. نعرف أنه الحكيم الذي لا يخلق شيئا إلا عن حكمة، نعرف أنه خبير يعرف حقائق الأمور.
One of the most famous scientists of this century, of course, was Albert Einstein. And he had the view, he was definitely an atheist. But nevertheless, he kept making statements which included the word God. One of his, when he was talking about quantum mechanics, he said he disliked it as a physical theory because it was probabilistic, because you couldn't predict things exactly. And he said, and he phrased that by saying, God does not play dice. And in his later writings, he invariably said that he had a view of some cosmic, he never called it a cosmic being, and he never called it a cosmic force. I mean, he didn't go to Star Wars or anything. But it was a cosmic entity which he, it seems to me, that he thought there was some reason, some mathematics, some logic, some law behind it all. And I think that's what he meant when he used the word God.
भगवान तो सृष्टि का क्रिएटर है और सर्वशक्तिवान है, निराकार ज्योति बिंदु है, और इस ज्योति बिंदु में ही सब गुण शक्तियों के सिंधु जैसे भर, बिंदु होते हुए भी सिंधु है, यानी इन सब से भरपूर। भगवान एक सर्वशक्ति का पुंज है। जैसे बीज होता है तो बीज में सब झाड़ की शक्तियाँ समाई हुई होती है, इसीलिए बीज को पावरफुल कहा जाता है। ऐसे परमात्मा जो है वो सर्व शक्तियों का जैसे मिला हुआ बीज रूप है। इसीलिए परमात्मा जो कुछ हमको जीवन में चाहिए उसके प्राप्ति करने का विशेष एक स्थान.
One common thread between religions and civilizations is the notion of God as light. On many other aspects of God's identity, opinions differ.
It's up to yourself to find out boys, you know.
Well, I can only go by what I was taught in school. Long hair, beard, good looking, 6 foot.
I'm not really sure. He's just like a spirit to me.
God's just a really important idea, like truth, love, freedom.
The Alpha and the Omega, the start and the end, that's God.
It's like a being or just an energy that's just out there and that comes and affects your life in any way.
God is different things to different people, but God is love.
No matter how the idea of a higher power is represented, scholars and religious leaders generally agree that everyone is talking about the same thing.
When one studies the variety of human societies, and anthropologists are aware of something like 15,000 different human cultures. One thing that becomes very quickly clear is that the way people make their living in the world tends to affect the way they view the world and the way they view the afterlife and the higher world as well. Hunter-gatherers tend to see divinity, if you will, the sacred, it's a better term, as inherent in nature, in all of life. Sometimes religious scholars will call that pantheism or panentheism. Then with early horticultural societies, we see the rise of gods and goddesses, nature spirits that are embodied in particular divine presences. Then, as we make the shift over into herding and agricultural societies, we see the beginnings of monotheism, which is a kind of reform that takes place in the pantheons of deities, gods and goddesses. And just as the human societies are tending to become more and more sort of pyramidized, well, the celestial hierarchy goes through the same process of evolution, and we have the high god at the top, and then the various classes of gods and weather gods and so on, and then sort of local nature spirits at the bottom of the celestial hierarchy or pyramid as well. Well, after a certain point, that gets so complex that reformers come in. Reformers come along who say, no, 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 the high god at the top of the pyramid, that's the one God, that's the only God.
ਵੈਗਰੂ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਕਹਿ ਲੋ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ, ਗੋਡ ਕਹਿ ਲੋ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ, ਅੱਲਾ ਕਹਿ ਲੋ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ, ਰਾਮ ਕਹਿ ਲੋ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ, ਰਹੀਮ ਕਹਿ ਲੋ, ਕੇਵਲ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਹੈ.
I think it would be very difficult for it not to be the same one. I think there is a force of goodness that comes through all the great religions, and we have different names and different ways of expressing God.
Religions are products of different histories, different cultures, different contexts. There are diverse ways of relating to Him or her. People experience God in different ways, and that has more to do with them than it has to do with God. It's a more reflection of their own particular character and personality and makeup.
وأنا أطلب من أي إنسان في الدنيا إذا أراد أن يبحث عن حقيقة الله عز وجل أن يترك كل ما عرف سالفا، وأن لا يتقيد بفكرة أو برأي مسبق، وأن يبدأ التفكير بشكل فطري، بشكل نقي ونزيه. عندها يصل إلى الله.
For thousands of years, in thousands of ways, we have searched for the truth about God. And despite times of confusion and acts of inhumanity, God remains alive in the consciousness of humankind, continually inspiring hope for our future.
How will God make an appearance at the end of time? That's an interesting question. Of course, a lot of people have their very specific expectations that there will be a great prophet or teacher who will come. And of course, there are a lot of people who are quite happy to cast themselves in that role. There are those who are looking for, again, signs in the heavens, maybe a great comet to appear, and this will be the sign of God's return. One's tempted to say that most convincing appearance of God would be as a change of heart in human beings. You know, if I saw human beings en masse really showing evidence of a deep change of heart and showing signs of generosity and forgiveness, I'd say that would be the clearest evidence of God's return.
If you are really in touch with God's presence, then this will create relationships which are the process of reconciliation and of peace. But if your sense of the divine doesn't lead you to behave in a particular moral fashion, then you haven't sensed that divine properly. And therefore it's precisely being in touch with God that is the key to peace for humankind.
लेकिन मनुष्य की बुद्धि बिगड़ जाने के कारण ही अशांति है। जब मनुष्य की बुद्धि सुधर जाएगी तब विश्व में शांति स्थापित हो सकती है। इसलिए मनुष्य की बुद्धि की शांति ही विश्व की शांति है। इसमें हमारे देश के ऋषि महर्षियों ने केवल अपने बुद्धि के शांति के लिए प्रयत्न नहीं किया है, औरों की बुद्धि के शांति के लिए उन्होंने ध्यान धारणा किया है। जैसे एक दीपक जलता है, उसका प्रकाश चारों ओर फैलता है, उसी प्रकार एक सात्विक व्यक्ति, एक योगी एक जगह रहेगा, उसकी सात्विक भावना औरों पर भी उसका प्रभाव पड़ता है। उसी प्रकार यदि हमारे देश के ये संदेश है ऋषि मुनियों का, प्रत्येक व्यक्ति को योगी होना चाहिए। तस्माद योगी भवार्जुन, भगवान ने कहा है कि प्रत्येक व्यक्ति को योगी होना है। जब प्रत्येक व्यक्ति जब योगी होगा, यदि 1000 में एक व्यक्ति योगी रहेगा, वो अपने प्रभाव से 1000 लोगों को संभाल सकता है। इसी प्रकार इसको हम लोग व्यापक रूप से प्रचार करेंगे तो सभी के बुद्धि जब शांत हो जाएगी, तभी जो विश्व में संपूर्ण रूप से शांति स्थापित हो सकती है।
And that's where there are certain very important skills, like things we would call in the West more prayer, or in the East they would call more meditation. Opportunities to be more in touch with oneself.
क्योंकि मेडिटेशन का अर्थ ही है मन को परमात्मा से लगाना। इसीलिए मेडिटेशन जो है, यानी आत्मा का परमात्मा से जब मिलन हो जाता है, जोड़ हो जाता है, तो फिर परमात्मा जो है वो नज़दीक हो जाता है और परमात्मा जो भी हम चाहें परमात्मा से मिल जाता है, इसलिए नज़दीक हो जाते हैं।
It's like we have to be a channel of God's peace. I think Francis of Assisi wrote that, "Make me a channel of your peace." And it seems to me that we need to have a whole lot of people, a massive people willing to be a channel of God's peace and love and justice. There is something to do with a number of people of goodwill from all across the globe, all having that same desire. As we stand there and pray or meditate quietly, we are together channeling something of God's peace into this war-torn or war-threatened world. And it seems to me that God can act through that.
To watch Peace of Mind channel videos on YouTube, subscribe us on youtube.com/TV Peace of Mind. Just a click for a peaceful life.